Hi everybody, you're all very welcome to our Christmas Superfoods webinar. We have a little poll at the front here. We're just gather a little bit of information on you. So as you're joining, please feel free to put some information into the polls there, and we'll do a couple at the end as well. So we're just going to give everybody a chance to join. So we'll just wait another couple of minutes here. Okay, so those of you just joined, if you want to fill in the poll at the start, we're just getting a bit of information about what you know on the Christmas Superfoods, and then we'll kick off. Oh, we still have people coming. Okay, really going. Okay, I think we might end that one and we'll start. Does anybody else want to do a last quick into the poll there, and then we'll kick off? Right, we will get started. The other one that I'd love to just pop up for you is just whether or not this is your first webinar with us, because we do lots and lots of webinars. So we're just curious to see if you've been to any before. Okay, so it looks like most of you are new. So we'll pop that up. I think we've about 14% of you have come to before, and about 86% of you, this is your first time. Well, you're very welcome. So my name is Sarah Keogh. I'm a dietitian with the Coeliac Society, and I'm going to take you through some Christmas hints and tips and really look at some of the fantastic foods that we actually eat at Christmas, because I think sometimes we miss, we sometimes think it's all unhealthy at Christmas, but actually there's loads of really, really good stuff here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop up my slides, and then I'm going to go through them with you and talk you through a few different things. If you have any questions as we go, pop them into the chat, and then what I can do is I'll keep an eye on that, and we'll answer questions either as we go, or we'll have a bit of a chat at the end. And I just wanted to let you know, I don't know if you know, but the Coeliac Society now has a shop, and we're based in Clondalkin. And we have a pop-up shop for Christmas with lots of just gluten-free Christmas treats and things in there. So do pop in and say hello. And it's open from 10 p.m. to 2 p.m. Monday to Friday. So Christmas Superfoods. And I'd just like to say thank you to Shar, who have sponsored this section, and all of you either should be getting an email that will allow you to claim a free packet of biscuits for your Christmas dinner, gluten-free biscuits from Shar. So do remember to check your email at the end and go to that link for yourself. So why are we talking about Christmas superfoods? So what I want to talk about is really which superfoods are actually good for you. So which Christmas foods are actually good for us? And then how can we sort of manage treats? And let's face it, the traditional overeating at Christmas. And I want to talk just very little about boosting energy and just actually feeling well, because although, we look forward to Christmas and we enjoy it, sometimes, especially if the person doing most of the organizing and the Christmas shopping, you can end up absolutely exhausted by the end of it. So is there anything we can do there that might help as well? And then what about if you have celiac disease, and how do you manage Christmas? Or if you're not celiac yourself, how do you manage it if you have lots of people with celiac disease who are attending? So the good news when it comes to Christmas is that although we tend to talk about chocolates and cakes and sweets and all of those things at Christmas, Christmas food is also things like turkey and ham and Brussel sprouts and smoked salmon and all of those foods. And actually they're really, really nutritious. There's an awful lot that they have to offer. So, these are the good things to focus in on. The bad news is that on average, people gain about 5 pounds over Christmas. Now, that's not on Christmas Day. That's over the whole sort of holiday season with it. And on average, we eat about 6,000 calories a day on Christmas Day, and that's between food and drink over the day. The bad news is we also tend to eat fewer fruits and vegetables over Christmas. We tend to eat a lot more sweets and treats and alcohol, but sometimes a lot of people can run into digestive problems. And what we would see quite often at the Coeliac Society is where people are thinking, oh, I'm really not feeling good. Maybe I got gluten somewhere. And absolutely that can happen. But sometimes it's just if you're not putting the fiber in, as they often say with digestion, you get out of it what you put into it. And fiber tends to fall down quite a bit at Christmas. So it's one of the reasons sometimes digestive issues can occur. And obviously there's quite a lot we can do about that. So the first tip that I would say to you for Christmas is do keep trying to get your 5 a day every day over Christmas. And it's really just about getting your fiber in. It's a big part to help keep digestion just working nicely. You don't need to have indigestion on the day, but also you're going to pick up your vitamin C here. And we know vitamin C is important for a really healthy immune system. And, even COVID aside, we don't want to be getting the coughs and colds and things like that. And I think if any of us have kids at school at the moment, we know that they're all bringing home various bits and pieces now, not necessarily just COVID, but we want to keep those immune systems working. Keep your fruit and veg in because they are really going to help. But also, if you're making sure that you're getting your fruit and your vegetables in with your different meals, it sort of takes up a little bit of room. And although you can still absolutely enjoy the treats things, you're not going to be really hungry for them in the same way. And actually, it's quite nice then that you just balance things out. So with that in mind, I want to talk about the first Christmas superfood, which is Brussels sprouts. And these are, it's funny, it's a vegetable that people very often only eat on Christmas Day, but actually this time of year, they're out all over the place and they are absolutely fantastic. They're a really good source of fiber and potassium, which is really important for just looking after muscle cramps, all of that sort of thing. We need it for healthy blood pressure. Vitamin K, essential for healthy bones. And given that lots of people with celiac disease do run into issues with things like osteoporosis, the vitamin K is a nice, important nutrient to have coming in there. Brussels sprouts are full of folate, so folic acid. They're also rich in vitamin C, and this even when they're cooked. I know we often worry that, when we cook the food, do we lose all of the nutrition? Actually, we keep most of it. If you want to, you could try them lightly steamed. Now, I know on Christmas Day, you're probably going to soak them in butter and bacon and have them nice like that, but you could try them the rest of the, outside of Christmas, a little bit lightly steamed, and they really have some fantastic nutrition there. So our Christmas tip number 2 is really pack in your protein, because a little bit like the fruit and veg, apart from Christmas Day where we're eating mountains of turkey, protein can fall away because, again, if you're nibbling all day long, you don't necessarily have the appetite for other foods just across the whole sort of season with it. And so these are foods like your beans, nuts, poultry, meat, eggs, all of those. And the other thing about protein foods is that where you also pick up your iron. And iron is just a really important nutrient, again, for everybody. But if you have celiac disease, you're a little bit more at risk of being low in iron. And of course, you're tired. You feel down. It can really affect your mood. You can just not feel like you're doing anything, or you're dragging yourself around. And it's not how any of us want to spend Christmas. So do remember to have your protein foods at 2 to 3 meals a day. Obviously, you're going to be well covered on Christmas Day for that one, but just make sure, something like maybe 1 egg at breakfast, a couple of spoonfuls of seeds over your cereal in the morning. Any kind of seeds are brilliant, and they'll give you a bit of fiber as well. A high protein yogurt in the morning. So just thinking about different ways that you can top that up. Same at lunchtime. It's just making sure there's a bit of tuna or chicken or hummus or a bit of cheese or something in there that there's a bit of protein. And I think most of us are pretty good at getting our protein at dinner time. So second superfood is turkey. And turkey is just fantastic for protein, really, really rich in protein, but it's also a good source of quite a few of our B vitamins, especially vitamin B3, which is niacin. And niacin is important for a few jobs in the body, but it's important for what we call psychological function. So really just keeping the brain working. Vitamin B6 is important for good nerves, and vitamin B12 for overall energy and making healthy blood. But you're also going to pick up zinc and selenium here. And these are 2 other nutrients that are important for a healthy immune system. So there's lots and lots of good reasons to be tucking into your turkey on Christmas Day. One thing I would say is try and go for some of the darker meat as well as the light meat. I know we talk a lot about, the turkey breast has less fat and the turkey leg has more. The difference isn't huge, but the darker meat in the turkey is really where you might pick up a little bit of iron in there, and some of the other minerals are more likely to be in that. So it's good to kind of get a little bit of each and just balance the nutrition there. Third Christmas tip, and I mentioned it at the start, is really find your fiber. If I do get calls over kind of coming up to Christmas and just after about digestion, the one thing we'll keep coming back to is fiber. And I know if anyone has come and seen me at the clinic, at the dietitian clinic at the Coeliac Society, they'll know fiber and digestion is always a big part of our conversation. So digestion can be an issue. Now, this can be heartburn, it can be indigestion, it can be feeling bloated, it can be just not as regular. And there's a couple of things to do there. I mean, fiber, absolutely. If you're not getting your sort of 25 grams of fiber in a day, you can run into trouble with it. So there's loads of foods to get it. I know on a gluten-free diet, people often, we do see straight away the fiber levels go down because a lot of us are getting our fiber normally from, brown bread, or we're getting it from high fiber breakfast cereals, and suddenly there's a big limit on those. So we do tend to see fiber fall down. However, you can get fiber in loads of other foods. So things like nuts and seeds, fruit and vegetables, beans, lentils, they're all great sources of gluten-free fiber. And just to say, some packets of lentils recently we're starting to see it may contain gluten on the label of those. So just check those out. And if you're not sure, do get in touch with us and we can find out some brands for you that are gluten-free. From an indigestion point of view, if you're kind of getting a little bit of heartburn and reflux, and if it's not your normal, like if you have that all the time, this isn't anything to do with Christmas, but if you find it's turning up at Christmas, one of the simplest things to do is just don't overfill your stomach. And I know half the fun of Christmas is eat until you nearly think you're going to explode. But if you pack your stomach too full, it's a lot more difficult for your body to break down the food, and it puts pressure on your stomach. And that means that sometimes that pressure pops some of that food along with the stomach acid up into your throat. And that's where you get the heartburn. So think about it when you're eating, you're better off to kind of stop when you're about 80% full, like a little bit of room left, and even wait an hour and then have dessert. And just space it out a little bit. It's not that you can't have the food, but maybe particularly if you're getting heartburn or reflux, just dial that back a little bit and you can be a lot more comfortable then over Christmas Day. So the next superfood to take a look at are nuts. And, these are used a huge amount of Christmas. And again, fantastic source of protein, but also iron, zinc, fiber, B vitamins. And actually some nuts will give you a little bit of calcium. I wouldn't be relying entirely on nuts for calcium, but they will give you a little bit in there as well. So where they're going to come in really, really well is that they're going to come in, they're often snacks that we have around, things that we nibble on while we're watching the Christmas movie. If you have vegetarians, then your nut roast is fantastic, and it is really, really well packed then with all of those vitamins and minerals, and it's a lovely centerpiece as part of the Christmas dinner as well. Do try and go for the unsalted nuts as much as you can, just because we do tend to actually have a huge amount of salt over Christmas, kind of between sort of crisps and salted nuts, and then the ham, and then all of those different things. The salt can add up quite a bit, so worth just keeping an eye on that one, but the nuts are fantastic. So our Christmas tip number 4 is to boost your B vitamins. And really I'd focus on these from the point of view of kind of mood. We know that we need good levels of B vitamins for good mental health. We know that they play a role in things like anxiety and depression. You've probably all seen, if you go into health food shops and chemists, they'll often have B complex as sort of a stress vitamin. And it's really good for your body to get all of those B vitamins in there. And I mentioned some of them are good for your nerves, good for just psychological function. So lots and lots of benefits with it. The thing about B vitamins, it's not like there's just one where you can just go to a food and get it. So there's lots of B vitamins. So we need to be eating a really wide variety of foods. And this is one of the reasons when we talk about nutrition a lot, we talk about eating lots of different foods, really mixing it up, getting different things in there, because that way you have a much better chance of getting all of your nutrition. And from this point of view, really a really good chance of getting your B vitamins as well. So milk, eggs, meat are the place to go for things like vitamin B12. Nuts and seeds are great for things like vitamin Bs 1, 2, and 3. Green vegetables, fantastic for folate. Your fish and shellfish kind of pretty much give you everything. They're brilliant. So your smoked salmon on Christmas Day is fantastic. And then you can add things like nutritional yeast into some recipes. Goes lovely if you're making vegetarian or vegan gravy. And they'll all be ways of topping up the B vitamins there as well. So talking of B vitamins, ham of all things is a fantastic source of B vitamins. And I know we tend to think about ham as being nearly slightly processed and so on, but actually it's a great source of things like protein and zinc and selenium. And we mentioned how important they are for the immune system. Would you believe ham actually has a little bit of vitamin D? It would give you about 15% of your RDA for vitamin D. You'll also get the vitamins B1, 3, 5, and 6. So these are all, as I mentioned just a minute ago, really important for just mental health kind of through Christmas and keeping an eye on it. Just a note on the salt as well, really good idea to soak your ham, even for a couple of hours, and then throw off that water and then fill it back up again before you boil it. And it just takes an awful lot of the salt out of it and just reduces the salt that we have over the Christmas day. So Christmas tip number 5, and this comes back to people who find that they start Christmas at one weight and end it substantially heavier. Now, there's absolutely no problem enjoying the Christmas treats, but just watch the mindless grazing, because sometimes if the food is there and it's visible and in front of you, you find yourself picking at it, even when you don't even want it, or it's just because it's there. So, I mean, something to do is put food away, like have your Christmas dinner, have your time, take out the food when you're eating, but when it's finished, out of sight is out of mind. So just pop it into a cupboard, put it away. And that way, if you really want it, you can go and get it, but you're not just picking as you go by. It's also worth checking if you're hungry. And, just over there, because I know the treats hang around for a few days, but we can end up just snacking again because food is there. And it's worth just for a second saying, so, well, am I actually hungry? And if you're not, can I, wait half an hour or an hour till I am hungry and then go for it? Because, I often say when you feel hungry, your body's telling you it actually needs the food. Whereas if you're not hungry, your body's trying to communicate, actually, I'm okay here. I don't need anything at the moment. I'm busy digesting the last meal, and just give it a little space. And then what that finds is you still get to enjoy the snacks, and you enjoy them a little bit more when you're hungry, but you're not that mindless eating where you end up just going through huge amounts of food just because you're picking through the whole time. Chocolate then if you're going to snack on something, chocolate is fantastic, especially dark chocolate, which is a really good source of iron and zinc, magnesium, potassium, copper. Copper is really important for really good color in your skin and your hair. And obviously iron is something, as I mentioned, we can fall down on quite a bit, but dark chocolate's fantastic. So if you are having chocolates over Christmas, the dark chocolate ones are going to be fantastic. And if you actually mix your chocolate with nuts or dried fruit, then you're going to double up on the nutrition you're getting there, plus add a little bit of fiber with it. But even milk chocolate has a lot to offer. Milk chocolate still has a little bit of iron, and would you believe, because of the milk, it's also a source of calcium. Now, there's probably healthier sources of calcium, but it's no harm to actually have a look and see what else is out there. So I have a question there. Someone is asking me, I find it difficult to find nuts that are actually specified as gluten-free. So how do I find out what brands are? So what we would say is nuts, plain nuts with nothing done to them, are what we call naturally gluten-free. So they don't naturally contain any calcium. Any gluten. So what we would say is that it's actually not legal for companies to put gluten-free on foods that are naturally gluten-free. So it's a bit of a nuisance, because it'd be great if they could, but they're actually not allowed. So what you would look for on nuts, now the vast majority of them absolutely gluten-free. Again, it's a little bit like lentils I mentioned. It's just check a may contain on the back. Sometimes they might say may contain gluten. Now I have to say I haven't seen any. Now, I'm not saying that they don't exist, but I tend to wander around the supermarkets checking for gluten and things. So while we do see may contain gluten on particularly lentils and even a little bit on quinoa recently, haven't seen them on nuts. So they don't actually have to say gluten-free, and actually they're not legally allowed to say that they're gluten-free. So your plain nuts, and as long as there's no may contain on those, they're going to be fine. But if you're really unsure, do get in touch with us at info@coeliac.ie, and we will kind of see if we can get a specific brand for you. But they should all be gluten-free. With that. So what about alcohol? So, I mean, mulled wine and hot whiskies and hot ports, they really are part of the fun of Christmas. And, alcohol definitely goes up over the time period. Trouble is, though, alcohol does add calories. So, a pint of beer might be giving you anything, up and around, depending on the beer, about 150 calories per pint. A whole bottle of wine might have about 700 calories. Now, the thing is, we don't want to be calorie counting our way through Christmas, but if we're not slightly noticing it, it can be one of the reasons that we gain a bit of weight. But alcohol also disturbs your sleep. So even if you just have one glass of wine, one gin and tonic, one beer, that's enough to sort of disturb your sleep that night. And look, grand if that's a couple of days over Christmas, but if it ends up being every day, it's one of the reasons people often end Christmas absolutely exhausted. And I think we've all had it, where we've gone into it having a great time. A few days later, you're flattened, then suddenly you're wide open for all the coughs and the colds and everything else. So just don't underestimate the importance of getting your sleep with that. So we do want to still be thinking about getting our 8 hours sleep at night over Christmas. And I said, a couple of days in and out where you're just not drinking anything, just to make sure you're letting your body get that really deep rest that it does. And if you're lucky enough to have a few days off over Christmas, I often think that's a lovely time. Just let your body rest if you can, take a bit of time with it. So get some good sleep in there. And the problem is, if you're not sleeping terribly well, you're a bit grumpy the next day. So, and especially if you still have lots of people in the house, you don't want to be feeling like that. So what are the guidelines for alcohol? So we would talk about trying to stick to the guidelines for alcohol with it, which is 11 standard drinks a week for women and 17 standard drinks a week for men. Now, can I just say here, this is a limit and not a target. One standard drink is about half a pint of beer, lager, stout, ale, any of those. 100 mils of white wine. So remember, it's not a glass of white wine, it's 100 mils of white wine, which means that you should be getting 7 glasses of white wine out of the bottle. So watch that. If what you've got on Christmas Day, especially, is those big buckets for wine glasses, and you're filling them up with a good generous pour, you're actually putting maybe 2 to 3 sort of standard drinks per glass. And then people are thinking, well, I only had 2 glasses, but actually you might have had about 6 sort of standard drinks with that. It's a smaller measure for red wine. Red wine is typically much higher in alcohol than white wine. So white wine depends on the wine, but around 12% alcohol, but red wine can get up to 14.5%, and I've even seen 15% alcohol. So that's why the measure for red wine is so much smaller. So, and I know nobody pours like this, but you should be getting 7 glasses of white wine out of the white wine bottle, and you should be getting 10 glasses out of the red wine bottle. Now, I know if you measure that out, it is tiny. Visually it looks small. So I'm not saying do that, but just be aware with wine that it is a lot higher in alcohol than most people think. And I think one of the problems with wine in Ireland in particular is that we tend to drink wine like beer, and we tend to sort of think about it like beer. So we tend to put it in the big glass and we tend to gulp it. Whereas wine is a spirit. You really have to think about wine in like closer to whiskey. All right, so just keeping it nice and small, because if you go out and have a whole bottle of red wine, 15% red wine on your own, you're getting close to 8 or 9 gin and tonics with that. And I think people just don't often think about it that much. And then they wonder why they have a hangover the next day. So what can we do along the way? Because most of us who drink are going to drink around Christmas. So if you're going out somewhere, or if you're going to somebody's house, or if somebody's come to you, when you're starting, the first thing to do is drink a glass of water. Because what will happen is if you're thirsty, you're going to drink your first drink very, very quickly. Particularly things like beer. A lot of people when they're thirsty will drink the beer. So if you have a nice glass of water first, before you start your first alcoholic drink, it means you're more likely to sip it. So it lasts a little bit longer. And over time, that just reduces the overall amount of alcohol that you have. I would put a jug of water on the table for Christmas Day. Sometimes it's the thing we forget, that we have a lot of the soft drinks and we have, the wine, and we've all of those there. But actually, if the water is on the table, people will actually drink it. Whereas if it's not there, people might not necessarily remember. And it can be good just to hydrate as you're going. It's a good idea to alternate the alcoholic drinks with water. Now, when I talk to people about this, they go, well, I have the water with the wine. But what I'm saying is that, if you happen to be out in a pub and you're in the rounds, that you have your alcoholic drink, but the next whole round is that you're having water there, something like that. And then just split them up, because you'll often find that if you're, the effect of it will still work, but you just drink that little bit less, which is nicer for your liver. Your liver wants to come out of the holidays feeling healthy as well. You can do things like mixed spirits, if you're having a gin and tonic, but use lots of mixer and plenty of ice so that you make a really, really long drink out of it. So it's still lovely and flavorful, but it's sipping and it's taking you a lot longer to actually drink it with that. You can make white wine spritzers, adding some sparkling water into it just to dilute it down a little bit. But actually, it's worth, if you can, take time to have a look for wines with lower alcohol contents. And, I hadn't looked a huge amount, but my mum really she 1 or 2 glasses of wine and she's done. So I found a really nice sparkling wine that was 4% alcohol. And it was great because she could kind of sip it, but it wasn't actually going to be a huge amount. And, there's lots and lots of them that actually are much lower in alcohol. And that just eases the whole thing. And especially in terms of having a bit of a woolly head the next day, it's going to make a difference. I just see one question that's popped up here is there any nutritional value in vegan chocolate? I'm inclined to eat it more than dairy because of trouble with sinuses. So vegan chocolate is usually dark chocolate. So dark chocolate, most of it is naturally going to be vegan anyway. So it's just the chocolate, so cocoa and chocolate and all of that itself doesn't have any animal products in it. We just tend to add, say if we're making milk chocolate, we add the milk and things like that to it. So your kind of vegan chocolate is going to be fine, and the nutrition is still going to be fantastic in there as well. So what's our next Christmas tip? So go outside. And especially if you've had, a big day on Christmas Day and there's been a bit of wine and there's been the mulled wine and maybe had a gin and tonic as well, and the head is a bit woolly, one of the best ways to clear the head is get out in fresh air for 20 minutes. People, as a dietitian, people often ask me for hangover cures, and there's all kinds of things with it, but hands down, the very best thing is to just not drink a lot the first time. But if you weren't that sensible, fresh air, you'd be surprised. It's often the last thing that you want to do. But if you get up and go out, like 15, 20 minutes later, it really makes a difference. But even if you're not drinking, get out into the fresh air, because we do tend to sort of hunker down over Christmas and go nowhere. And the fresh air isn't happening. And actually, it's good for your mood just to get outside and move. So it's not even about sort of burning off calories or anything like that, but it does give you a nice appetite for the next meal that you're going to have. And it does, as I said, it just boosts your mood. That fresh air is lovely. And especially if it's a sunny day. And we're not going to make any vitamin D going for a walk on a sunny day in winter, but it's good for your body, just your overall mood, to get out if there's a bit of sunshine, and even for a short walk or cycle or whatever it is you're into, just have that stroll around and get that fresh air in, and you will feel a heck of a lot better. One thing just to mention is sort of shopping sensibly. You know, I've worked for years as a dietitian, and I'm always fascinated at the amount of food people fit into their trolleys at Christmas. And I can't say I'm a saint when it comes to that either. But it's very easy just to fill up the trolley with treats. And I suppose the question is, do you need them all? Because sometimes we could kind of go, well, I need this, this, and this. And then we get to the supermarket and like, oh, right, what about this and what about that? So the first guide for shopping for Christmas is don't shop for 50 people if there's only 5 people coming over. So I know, particularly in Ireland, we're horrified at the idea that we might run out of something and that somebody will be looking for something and you haven't got it. So we do tend to buy much more food than people need. We tend to serve much more food than people need. And the problem is it runs into an awful lot of food waste. And we know, like looking at kind of research, we know that people buy a turkey, they throw more than 1/3 of the turkey in the bin. So if that's you, do you need a smaller one? Do you, and even with hams, like, do you need the biggest ham in the shop? I know visually it looks stunning and you've the giant turkey and all the rest. But unless you're someone who's going to eat the left, I mean, I love turkey, so I tend to get quite a big one. I'll pick at it for days afterwards. And I really love that. For me, that's Christmas, But if you're not someone who's going to eat turkey the next day, buy a smaller one, just keep it down. Be careful as well of the just in case. Unless 50 people are going to just in case descend on your house. The problem is if you buy it, who's going to end up eating it? And either it gets thrown in the bin or you end up overeating. And when I meet people and they talk about putting on weight, it's usually because Christmas actually starts on, with the late toy show. So this year, 26th of November. And people get in, and it's the biscuits and the treats and the cakes, and that runs for the whole of December. And then you have Christmas, and then you've all the leftovers that are nearly lasting 2 to 3 weeks into January. So it's actually 6 weeks of kind of overeating as such, rather than what Christmas is, which is a couple of days. So I'm not saying don't go out and enjoy time in between, but just be careful that you don't suddenly go, well, it's Christmas for 6 weeks and eat like that, and just keep an eye on it. So do make a list and stick to it when you're going shopping, because that's, if you plan out what you need and you think, okay, if you go shopping and there's 1 or 2 things you think that would be nice, but just be careful about popping lots in, because it just may not get eaten with it. And I'd also say, think about how much food one person can actually eat on Christmas Day, and think how much food you end up, scraping into the bin just after the Christmas dinner, and not just the turkey, but things like, the carrots, the Brussels sprouts, the potatoes. Like, how much do you normally have left over? And look, I cook Christmas dinner myself. I absolutely don't want anybody to run out of anything, but I have to say, year on year, I'll cook a little bit less each time with it. So planning ahead for celiac Christmas. So I know those of you who are here and have been celiac for a long time, probably have this down. But if it's kind of your first Christmas celiac, or if you're cooking for someone celiac, and we'll come to that in a second, a bit of advice is no harm. So if you're eating out, ring ahead. It's old news, but it's worth ringing ahead to a restaurant, because especially at Christmas, often restaurants have changed their menus. And we do know that with COVID, a lot of restaurants have a much more limited menu. So even if it's somewhere you're familiar with, just ring ahead and make sure they're still able to do gluten-free. The gluten-free options are still available for you. If it's a new restaurant, maybe you're going out with work or something like that, just check ahead and see how they are in cross-contamination. You know yourself when you're ringing them, you'll get to know whether they know what they're doing or not, just by the way that they chat to you about it. If you're going to someone else's house for Christmas, it's worth chatting to family about cooking gluten-free for you. People often struggle with this. Sometimes celiac disease is still seen as a bit of a fad, and that you're actually just being difficult with this for Christmas. So what we do have is a quick guide for celiac disease, and we have a celiac disease explainer. They're available on our website. And if you absolutely can't find them, just email us and we'll send them out to you. But I put those together for people to actually hand to family members, and it just explains celiac disease very simply and talks about why you really need to be strictly gluten-free, but it's not a fad, and here are some of the steps to take with it. Obviously, you know your own family and who'll be receptive to that or not, but just to let you know, those information guides are there and available. Do remember to check your food list, and we have a Christmas food list up on our Christmas hub at the moment, so lots of gluten-free treats. And do check out the shop. As I said, in Clondalkin, we've a Coeliac Ireland shop there, open from 10 to 2 from Monday to Friday, and we've Christmas treats in there if anybody wants to go into that pop-up shop. And check out the Christmas recipes. We have a Christmas hub on the website. There's loads of recipes in there. That cake actually came from Frances Buckley as our chef, and she has put together some fantastic recipes. So 5 different kinds of stuffing, different gravies, all of that. So just loads of ideas for you. And as I said, if any family members are cooking for you, you can pass those on and they'd be brilliant. So some of the things just to think about. No one wants to be glutened over Christmas. Do not want to be spending a couple of days feeling sick. So the first thing to remember is many Christmas foods are actually naturally gluten-free. So things like your turkey, your ham, the nuts, vegetables, fruit, cheese, all of those are naturally gluten-free. So there's huge options there. What you're watching out for, and these are the places I usually find people getting caught, is things like stuffing that hasn't been made with gluten-free bread. Gravy, if the stock cubes maybe used had gluten in them, sauces, depending on who's making them, whether they're thickened up with wheat flour or corn flour. And then kind of desserts, puddings and cakes generally need a bit of checking. And obviously cross-contamination is the other issue. If, you know, my kitchen is like a bomb site by the time Christmas is done and there's just food everywhere. And I think I'd hate, and thankfully we've no celiacs in our house, and I'd hate to be thinking of the cross-contamination if we had to do it. So it's really just being that little bit extra careful, because the amount that would fit on the tip of a pin is enough to trigger a celiac reaction in people. So it does need to be just a little bit careful. And I know plenty of families where the whole thing is just gluten-free. And you can actually pull that off quite well, because you can use gluten-free bread in the stuffing, you can use gluten-free corn flour in the gravy, you know, desserts, there's lots of recipes. And as I said, there's a beautiful gluten-free Christmas cake recipe up on the website. So sometimes that's just easier all around, especially if you're cooking in your own house. If you're cooking for someone else, as I said, your gluten-free bread, your gluten-free corn flour. The one thing just to check as well is people mean very well and they'll buy lots of gluten-free treats, but if you're someone who's sensitive to oats, a lot, you know, there can be oats in those as well. So just to let people know, because they'll often go, I bought you this tin of biscuits and they're gluten-free, and you're thinking, I can't even because they're full of oats. So just check that out and maybe let people know, especially if you're going to someone else's house. And as I said, check out our Christmas hub. It's at coeliac.ie. The last thing I would say to you is it is only one day. So I have to say, when I see kind of the articles that come out around Christmas and like, oh, you're going to eat 6,000 calories on Christmas Day, I would kind of go, so what? It's one day, go and enjoy it and really have, you know, a nice time with that. You know, so it's okay to have a day where you just don't worry about it. The thing just to be careful of that it doesn't run, as I said, to the whole 6 weeks, because that's where we might see less healthy kind of habits coming in. But for one day, just go, just enjoy it, and it's going to be absolutely lovely. So thank you very much. I hope you all have a very happy Christmas. As I said, check out our website, coeliac.ie, for the Christmas hub. Loads of recipes from our chef in there and lots of articles and hints and tips. And you can also follow us on Instagram at Coeliac Ireland. And again, we'll have lots of information coming up all through the year on celiac disease with it. So I have a couple of questions here, so I'm just going to go through those. What do I think of digestive enzymes if you're glutened? Unfortunately, they don't make any difference. There is, you know, we have a lot of evidence out there for them, and you know, lots of studies on them. If you actually have gluten, because it's a little bit like the reaction on it is kind of to do with your immune system. So taking enzymes with it, unfortunately, doesn't make any difference. And I do see sometimes that people would see enzymes that can break down gluten, but they don't break it down enough to actually make any difference to it. So it's, you know, it's not something that we recommend with it. If you are celiac, are you automatically sensitive to oats? I get confused as to whether I'm doing myself harm because I don't seem to have a reaction to oats. So no, if you're celiac, most people with celiac disease are not sensitive to oats. So about 95% of people can actually eat the oats and they're absolutely fine. If you're sensitive to oats, what it would be is that you're, you know, even when you're on your gluten-free diet, you're still feeling a bit sick, the gut maybe hasn't settled down, you're still getting some digestive symptoms. Or if your TTG, so your celiac blood tests, are still high, they're also going to be a sign. So what you might do if someone is still having digestive issues, and I'm going to pop down these slides here. So what we'd often see is people who come into the celiac clinic to me are often coming in with still bloating and diarrhea and constipation. So particularly if it's constipation, we absolutely look at fiber first. We look to make 100% sure people are gluten-free, because what I'd find is probably half the time if someone comes into me and they're still having digestive issues, we find out there's actually a bit of gluten coming in somewhere that they hadn't realized. So it might be that they're not using the food list all the time, or cross-contamination is coming in, or just things like that. So the first thing is definitely gluten out. Second thing then, as I said, fiber is a big one. Some people are temporarily lactose intolerant. So if someone's coming in, they've still got a lot of bloating, even though we've gone through the diet, the gluten is gone, the fiber is okay. So we might trial lactose free there as well. But to be honest, if you're not getting any symptoms with eating oats, if your TTGs, your celiac bloods, when you check them every year, are nice and steady, looks like you're tolerating oats, so you should be fine. It does not need to be something to worry about for you. Now, I think that is all of the questions. Yeah, we're just going to say, Jill has popped up there that the Clonakilty gluten-free kitchen mince pies are going to be in the shop from Mondays. So I think we have, and she has the address up there in the chat as well, if you want to come in and join us. So does anyone else have any other questions before we finish up? So what about spices for cooking? Now that has been a real difficulty this year, because one of the big and good olds have been kind of in our book for years for gluten-free, and they contacted us and said that they can't stand over their products as being gluten-free anymore. So Lidl and Aldi do have some gluten-free spices for cooking. So if you have a check, as far as I know, I think the list just came in, it should be going out on the additions list and then out onto the app very, very shortly for that. And we also have gluten-free spices available in our shop. So Unglued have a range of spices, and they're as well in the shop in Clondalkin if you want to pop out and have a look at those. I have to say thanks, Maria. You have a lovely comment there. Thank you very much for this most informative talk. We can always learn something new, no matter how long we've been on the diet. Well, I find that as a dietitian, I'm learning all the time as well. And people come into me and they say, oh, well, could this be celiac related? And I'm like, at this stage, I say no to nothing, because, you know, there's so many different things we're finding out about celiac disease. So I think we can all learn. Look, I'm glad you enjoyed that. I'm going to pop up. I just have a couple of polls, if you wouldn't mind, before you finish up. And it's really just to see what you learn. So if you wouldn't mind hanging on for a minute. And the question is, what is your knowledge of Christmas superfoods now after listening to the webinar? Did you gain anything with it? And in the meantime, if anyone has any questions, pop them into the chat there. We'll be here for another couple of minutes. Just a note, since we're coming to the end of the year, is do make sure you're getting your annual bloods done. Again, I see lots and lots of celiac patients, and they, you know, might be 15 years since they've had their iron checked or anything. So make sure once a year you get your celiac bloods checked, your thyroid, your vitamin D, vitamin B12, folate and iron, and just always keep an eye on those, because sometimes the only reason you know that there's suddenly gluten coming in somewhere is that your iron levels start to drop. And I've seen that where people have been eating the same food for years and have just assumed it's still gluten-free, but somewhere in the past it has actually changed for that. Thanks to everybody for doing that poll. And we have one more poll that we're just going to ask you, if you wouldn't mind filling out. And it's really just, have you got any recommendations on about how future talks could be delivered? You know, we just even ideas about how we do this. We're running them on Zoom, and it seems to be working well for lots of people. So just if you have any answers about that one. So if you have any answers there, you can let us know with that, or you can email us if you have any ideas for talks, for topics, anything that you'd like to do. If you email us at info@coeliac.ie, and we come up with lots of ideas, but it's always brilliant to get members telling us what it is they actually need. So get in touch with us. We're here for you. Now, I think we have everybody now. Okay, so everybody, thank you so much for joining. As I said, go on to our Christmas Hub. Do follow us on Instagram @Coeliac Ireland, and I hope you have a really, really lovely Christmas. Take care. Bye-bye.